Good evening, everyone. I hope that your holiday was restful, that it was filled with good food, good conversation, or that you had a nice quiet time. If not, time for reflection and appreciation. I was thinking that, the calendar, as it is, at least our Western calendar, and not only, but that it offers us so many opportunities to pause and to appreciate. In a way, holidays offer us moments to remember, as in reconstitute, any bits of life that we might have let get scattered in our busyness, in our to-doing. So if we go beyond the historical or the social significance of any given holiday, some of which can be problematic, as you know, we can also very simply take them as opportunities to stop and to look at ourselves anew, to take the chance to not do, not make, not chase, not buy or sell, so we can appreciate the holy in our days. So we can notice where we might be forgetting that holiness and remind ourselves to hold it up again and to live it. To live it. Many years ago, I read a little book called Sabbath by Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel. And he spoke of this very beautifully and in a very poignant way, much better than I could say it. He said, those who want to enter the holiness of the day must first lay down the profanity of clattering commerce, of being yoked to toil. They must go away from the screech of dissonant days, from the nervousness and fury of acquisitiveness, and the betrayal in embezzling their own lives. 6 days a week, we wrestle with the world, bringing profit from the earth. On the 7th, we especially care for the seed of eternity planted in the soil. I don't know what's a better phrase, the profanity of clattering commerce or being yoked to toil. Because it is a yoke, isn't it? All this doing and producing, and constantly having to make more of ourselves to prove the world that we matter. And underneath so much of that furious working and getting, I believe is the fear that if we don't do enough, we might be forgotten. And I should say, that when I sit down to write these talks, one of the first thoughts that comes up in my mind is, what would be good to speak about right now? What is important, and all of it is, of course, but what seems to be percolating in people's minds? And so, sometimes it has to do with things that I read. Often it has to do with things that you're telling me, with questions that you're bringing, conversations that we're having. And often there's a number of threads that then I try to pull together with more or less success. And these were some of the things that have been coming up recently. This preoccupation of not doing enough, not being enough, of spending our days wrestling with the world, wrestling with each other, wrestling with ourselves, as if this were necessary. As if our being needed to be constantly checked, improved upon. And as things would have it, I was recently reading a work by a writer who's also a Zen practitioner, by her own admission. And she was doing her own wrestling on the page. She was reflecting on her need to write, to tell stories, and questioning her own motivation. She said, the drive remains like a heartbeat, to let go of thoughts and to find stories instead. Perhaps I just want to bring you something good in the dark. Perhaps I am afraid that if I don't, I will be forgotten. Perhaps I am afraid that if I don't, other brighter people will race past me with their more interesting lives and their more efficient paths. And so I tumble them out here, my stories, like a purse emptied out on a counter, loose change pushed forward, hoping it's enough. And I so badly wanted to write to her when I read this. And I wanted to say, honey, don't waste your precious energy worrying about these other people, these more efficient paths, whatever those might be. You're a magnificent writer, and that's enough. Because she is, in fact, a magnificent writer, and it is enough. She is enough. And if one person or 1,000 remember afterward, will it really matter? Will it really matter, and to whom? What is the most important thing that we can do to honor our lives? If not to give them, all of us. All of 1%, if 1% is what we have, or 150%, if that is what we have, in any given day and any given moment. And if that's the measure, then every single one of us is doing just fine. But if that's the case, then why this persistent thought? Not enough, not enough, not enough. Why this persistent feeling? There's something wrong with me. I don't know what it is, but there's something wrong. There has to be. And I was saying to one of you, I spent a couple of decades wrestling with this thought myself, convinced that I alone felt this way, and that that's how it would always be. And then I found practice. And I found practice, and little by little, things began to make sense. Gradually, I began to think, maybe there's nothing wrong with me. Maybe I'm not the only one. Maybe everyone is struggling, and they're just better at hiding it than I am. I remember my teacher saying early on that he would look around at the adults in his life and think, does anyone know what the hell is going on? Sensing that offness, that there's something wrongness. he would look around and he would think, but everyone seems to be just going about their lives. And he wonders, is it just me? Well, am I just crazy? And I used to think, why can't I just be more laid back? Why can't I just enjoy my life? I mean, I did enjoy my life, generally speaking, but I also saw how hard it was. And I looked inside, I spent a lot of time with my mind, and I looked at the world and I thought, is it always this hard? And we could, in fact, spend our entire lives carrying that particular boulder around and not even notice. But the great teacher, Burmese teacher, Ajahn Chah, was walking through the forest with some of his monks, and he pointed to a large boulder by the side of the road. And he said, is it heavy? And his monk said, well, yes. And he said, not if you don't pick it up. And he smiled. Well, we do pick it up, don't we? We pick it up and we put it on our backs and we carry it around. And when we finally notice the weight, still, why is it so hard to put it down? Why can't we just set it down? A couple of weeks ago, I was speaking about avidya, ignorance, and how ignorance is born, and with it, the self and the world. Vidya is wisdom, the clear recognition of the truth of things, akin to prajna. And so avidya is the lack of that wisdom. And it's essentially a process of forgetting, a process of going from enlightenment to delusion, from wisdom to ignorance. And if we're lucky, it also marks the beginning of the path. Maybe not the moment that avidya arises, but the moment we know, oh, this is ignorance. The moment we begin to wonder, is there something else? And I made it a little complicated last time, so I just wanted to briefly go over it again, I hope more simply. In the beginning, there was ocean. As far and as clear as the eye could see, just ocean. And you were that ocean. Except so much vastness is too much. It's too vast, it's too overwhelming. And so in a moment in which Trungpa Rinpoche called it reverse enlightenment, a bit of ocean turns, and looking for something to grasp, it falls in love with a wave and calls it I. That's the first moment of ignorance, that initial illusion of separation. The second moment of ignorance, the wave, sensing that there's something wrong with this new way of being, feels unbalanced. It's like this view is incomplete somehow. But it figures that's just the way it is. Looks around, sees a bunch of other waves, they seem to be doing just fine, and thinks, I guess that's just how it is. And so the wave is now not only separate, but also confused, and has accepted its confusion. That's the feeling there's something wrong here. And it just strengthens that delusion. third moment of ignorance, the wave looks out at the rest of the ocean and sees all those other waves and thinks, this is me and that is them. I mean, they might look like me, but they're not me. And so they don't understand me. They don't know what it's like to be me. And I don't even really like them that much. So you stay over there. I'll stay over here. And now the separation is complete. Self and other have come into being. And what makes that situation a bit more challenging is that the separation comes with a kind of amnesia. We immediately forget we came from ocean, we were ocean, and we were whole. We forget we are ocean and we are whole. And so now when we look out at the world, we don't see ocean. Now all we see is waves. So I said to someone recently, what if there's nothing wrong with you? What if you're just a bit more attuned to the fact that this can't possibly be all there is? Because we've gotten so good at ignoring our own wisdom. You know, we have all these ready-made ways to cover it up. Ever more numerous, ever easier, more socially acceptable. But I would say, you know, perhaps just as painful as when we numb ourselves, like with, you know, with alcohol or with drugs. One of you was sharing with me that the word of the year for this year, according to the Oxford Dictionary, is brain rot. And the definition of brain rot, and I'm going to paraphrase slightly, is the deterioration of a person's mind as a result of consuming too much material that is trivial or unchallenging. If reverse enlightenment was possible at the beginning of time, think how much more susceptible we are to it now that our brains are deteriorating rapidly. I mean, think of children who are exposed to large amounts of material that is trivial and unchallenging. So perhaps it's ever more pressing to train the mind, to exercise discipline and some restraint so we can keep that mind clear. And I was thinking as I was writing this, I thought of that famous exchange, a kind of debate between the sixth ancestor and the senior monk, senior student of the fifth ancestor, Hongren. So Hongren challenges his Sangha to write a poem to express their understanding, a pretty standard thing in Zen. And his senior monk essentially says, the mind is like a mirror, and you constantly have to be wiping it to keep it clean, to keep it clear. And Huineng, the sixth ancestor, says, not really. Originally, there is no mirror and there's no dust. So what are you going to clean? And although the story says that the robe and the bowl of the Buddha went to the sixth ancestor, implying that his understanding was deeper than the senior monks, and he did, in fact, receive the transmission of the Dharma, the fact is that they are actually both true. Their understanding is not actually, you can't actually measure it. Compare it and say, this is better than that. Because the fact is that there is no mirror, and you have to keep it clean in order to know that. Otherwise, there would be no need for practice. Otherwise, we would just need to find the trick to turn on a switch and enlighten our minds immediately. And so we wipe that mirror every day through Zazen, through the practice of the precepts, through cultivating wisdom, the three trainings, Samadhi, Shila, and Prajna. To see that where we were once ocean, now we think we're wave. And so you could say that practice is the process of retraining ourselves to remember that we are still ocean. And also to work through our very strong inclination to collapse into wave, to keep ourselves small. And we think safe. Like that analogy I give of the vast field and the broom closet. How we would rather be in that dank, dark place because we're contained. Because the alternative to be out there is so exposed, because it can be frightening. And so, although I believe that all of us have a sense of that ocean nature, sometimes we turn away from it. Sometimes I would say consciously, willingly, because it's much more manageable to stay small. The problem is that it's not very satisfying. And when your inner world is not satisfying, what do? You go looking out there for things to fill it from the outside. And it doesn't work. Because that is like ordering shoes. When what you want is company, what you want is connection. The good thing is that although we are suffering from a kind of amnesia, it's not complete. There is that seed. What did Heschel call it? That on that seventh day, we care for the seed of eternity planted in the soul. The seed that knows there is something more vast. And given the right conditions, that seed sprouts enough for us to realize, oh, there is more here than what I saw at first. And we go searching. Some part of us does know that we are vast, and so that accumulating things or titles position doesn't ultimately make us happy, because that's like throwing toys into the ocean. I went through a period once where I thought, it's really true. Just nice things are nice. It's nice to have them. And admiration feels good. It's nice to have it. And I thought, is it really true that it's not satisfying? And so I did an experiment. And I thought, I'm just going to, for a period of time, I forget how long it was. I think it was like a month or so. I just thought, I'm just going to allow myself and go for all the many things that I feel that I like, that I find attractive, that I find compelling, and see what happens. What do I really feel? It was not a very well, the experiment was kind of self-fulfilling at a certain point. Because what started to happen is that the hit of pleasure that I got when I got the thing that I thought I wanted became shorter and shorter. I was saying to someone the other day, desire doesn't actually need an object. That's what I ended up seeing. Desire in itself feeds itself. It's its own fuel. The object is almost incidental. And so at a certain point, you need more and more, it seems, of the object to actually be satisfied, for the satisfaction to last longer. Because it's not really about the thing, it's about that hit of pleasure. And so it's sure that it doesn't work. And so it is, we are more likely to be satisfied when we listen to that voice in our ear that says, maybe there's another way. Because we can ignore it, and some of us do, for a long while. And what happens, it just gets louder, like the ocean, until it's a roar. Or like the ocean, that it just simply floods our lives. Things or money or pleasure ultimately are not satisfying, because the ocean doesn't want those toys. It wants to be ocean. It wants to flow. I was writing recently. I've been writing a series on the 8 worldly winds, which I have mentioned before. The 8 pair of opposites that keep us, they blow us this way and that and keep us tethered in samsara. And they're called the winds, or concerns, preoccupations, vicissitudes, obsessions, gain and loss, fame and disrepute, praise and blame, pleasure and pain. And when you look at them, they all fall under the overarching categories of hope and fear. What we hope to gain, what we hope to feel, and what we fear if the opposite happens. From joy to greed. Really in our search to feel good and to not feel bad. And the piece that I was writing recently was about fame and disrepute, status or disgrace, recognition, and dishonor. And I was saying, we all want, if not to be famous, at the very least, we want to be seen. We want to be recognized. We want to be acknowledged. We don't want to be dishonored, disapproved of, condemned, certainly. That seems obvious. And it seems obvious that this would be true. I mean, of course, we want to feel good about ourselves and we want to belong. But when you look at it a little bit more closely, there's something else driving this need. Because think about it, what is our biggest fear? It's really the fear to not be. And so the logic might go, the more famous I am, the more I matter. All these people say so. The more I matter, the less vulnerable I am to a fear that I might be insignificant, but really ultimately to death, to non-existence. So it's like shoring up the self that knows it's quite fragile to begin with. And so that is actually what powers all of these winds. The self, that belief in a fixed self. But this wind in particular, that one is kind of like the self on steroids. Because it feels so threatened. And so it makes itself bigger so that it's harder to disappear. By disappearing is the last thing the self wants. But if you come to realize, I'm not wave, but ocean, then do I really need to make myself large? I'm already boundless. Is there really a need to prove myself? I will never not be water. In truth, when it comes to ultimate truth, I will never be separate because I can't be. It's not possible. I will never not fit in. That would be like saying that a part of the ocean doesn't fit in itself. It's ridiculous to even consider it. And the best part of this whole thing is that when you no longer have anything to prove, all of your energy is freed up to just live, to just be, to just do the work you were meant to do. For no other reason that you are the one to do it. I really believe this is true. That the ultimate work for us human beings is to realize what it means to be a human being, first and foremost. But second, to find and do the work that each one of us is meant to do. Based on my own strengths, my own interests, my own ability, my own history, set of circumstances. What is the work that only I can do? And when you find that, and when you truly do that, with every ounce of your being, then what other people say, what other people think, is a root point. Imposter syndrome. Root point. The question, am I enough? How could you not be? Is someone doing more or better than I am? To ask that is only possible in the realm of separation. The point, I do believe, is to do the work. The work of waking up, and then the work, your work in the world. But to know what that is, we have to be quiet enough. We have to be able to listen. We have to be willing to trust. All the things that we know, we have to be willing to not know. And to discover what needs to be done. One of maybe my favorite ending to a sutra, my favorite passage perhaps in the sutras is in the fire sermon. The Buddha says, when liberated, there is knowledge that the person is liberated. When liberated, I know I'm liberated. I understand birth is exhausted. The holy life has been lived. What had to be done has been done. There is no more for the state of being. Another translation says something like, there is no more rebirth. What had to be done has been done. Wouldn't that be an amazing way to end the life? To know that this was true. That you did what had to be done by you. The Buddha was speaking about enlightenment, about putting an end to suffering. And I think we can think of it more broadly as the work of a life. And by this, I don't mean earning a living either. Right? I mean the work of a whole life. A particular gift or gifts that only we can offer the world. I did what had to be done. I did my best. I did my damnedest to understand who I am, what I am, and how to live out of that understanding. And second, I did my damnedest to live what I saw. Every time you take up a question, what is breath? What is a cypress tree? Do you realize that this is what you're really asking? Who am I and what is my work? Every time you take up a line on the faith line poem, every time you take up a line from your own life, and you wonder, what do I do? How do I best take a step right now? This is what we're asking. What is my work? How do I live? And to be able to say at the end of a life, I did that. It wasn't flawless. I failed a lot, but I tried again and again. I didn't give up. Even when I thought I can't do it, even when I thought it's too much, even when I thought it's not working, this is boring, I don't want to do this anymore. Even when I wondered, am I too late? I kept going. And I gave it my all. And it was a satisfying life. Because that is something that we could absolutely say then. It was a satisfying life. It was a joyous life. It was a full life. And I lived it as well as I could.